welcome to our main episode. That is the actual Mies Joseki, the episode that you've been waiting for, the very, very long episode with many, many lectures on Mies Joseki and all the very complex variations. So today we will cover some basics for Mies Joseki. When white honeys, black bumps into white and white extend up, black push, white blocks, and now we have... in the last episode, we covered the outer cut. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode, and I hope you guys became master of it. I think I've covered it pretty well. So the reason, as I said, the outer cut has been eliminated, sort of, in the professional world is because there are variations where black is gonna lose the win rate by like a few percentage points, and that matters a lot for professionals. And therefore, they discovered an inner cut that is a better variation according to AI. Against the inner cut, white needs to deal with these two stones first because that's the target of attack. So white plays the very beautiful Tsuji, that is to play. Usually when you have a shape like this, the second line Kusumi is pretty much always a Tsuji. So against this move, black of course can rush to protect the corner because then your stone will just be captured. Black extends, and now the first thing white cannot play is to play connect. It looks like this move protects everything over here, but then when black extend down, we see that it's very difficult for white to escape. If white plays the shape move, black can just play this very stupid looking Atari, and nothing white can do, right? White has to extend, and then we capture, and we can see black has all the territory, and a very nice outside too, and white is clearly broken into pieces. Of course, this is unacceptable for white. And therefore, white doesn't really connect. White has to push. This is a more efficient way to temporarily fix the weaknesses and also put pressure on black. So as you can see, Mies Joseki is a very fierce players at each other's throats type of Joseki. It's very easy to lose the game on the spot. So when white pushes up, black needs to be careful. Black has to play very tight as well. Like you can't just loosen up and play something like this, protect your corner, because then white is gonna honey. When black plays triangle, white just push and then push all the way to the first line, and white comes back and fix all the weaknesses with one single move. And now we can see that black is all confined in the corner and white's influence is everywhere. So this is unacceptable for black. And therefore, Mies Joseki plays like the Hane. So now you can remember this shape. This is the very basic, the base shape for Mies Joseki. And this is where all the variations, how do I put it? This is where all the branches start. Okay, so there are a few main variations that I will cover in great details. Namely, I will first cover the connection. Okay, so this is probably the simplest way for white to play. And then I will cover the tiger's mouth. This is the second main variation that white can play. And then I'll cover this very tricky and niche variation of Ataring on the second line. This is also a main variation that is a little bit less known. I have played that like this in my actual game as well. So I'll cover this. This could be your place of forging secret weapons in a tournament. And then finally, of course, I will cover the main variation of Mies Joseki, the most complicated, insanely complicated, variation. This is just insane. And I think a lot of videos will be about this variation. Okay, so... But before all of that, let's first say a couple things. First of all, if black, so the player in the corner, okay, in this case is black player. Let's go back a few moves. In order to play this, you have to make sure you have the ladder here. So you must have a stone in the opposite corner like this in order for this to work, right? And the reason is that when this happens, when black honeys, if you don't have the ladder, if this is a white stone, then you're in trouble because white can cut. The reason this cut doesn't work is because black can Atari and then extend. And now there's a Miai. Black can Atari the two stones, and there's a ladder going on. Black can start with this Atari and ladder the three stones. And now white is in trouble trying to resist doesn't really work for white. It looks like, while on the surface, it looks like when you Atari, I can Atari you, and therefore I also fix my weakness here. Looks like a good move, but then when black plays the Atari and then clamp over here, then white is in trouble, right? So black's Atari here is a Sente, and he doesn't even have to play it immediately. Okay, so now if white plays the Atari, black will Atari here. And then when white gets out, then we have an Atari over here, and that's game over. Now, if white tries to struggle in the corner, black now has a Tsuji. Let's first exchange these two. And then black has a first line Atari. White takes, and black connects. And then white only has 2 liberties, and therefore this is also game over. So trying to resist like this doesn't really work. And therefore at this point, it's just collapsing. But imagine if it's a white stone over here, then white can just calmly play a shape move. And now there's no problem here. And if you can't ladder the stone, then black is broken into pieces, and this doesn't work for black. So always remember that in the diagonally opposite corner, when you are the player playing the attach, you have to have a ladder. You have to have the ladder, okay? It could happen in cases where you have the diagonally opposite, like, you know, when players take corners like this. For example, if something like this, then you have to really watch out. Do you have the ladder or not? Usually you don't when in this kind of fuseki. Okay, so let's go back to the variation. So when black honeys, today we'll cover the simply white just connect, right? This is a very solid move, and this is honestly not a bad move. This is a very good move that I would suggest to you. But obviously, I mean, if you are watching my videos on Mies Joseki, you probably be looking for like the most complicated variation to trick your opponent. I understand, but I just want to cover this variation in case you encounter this, or in case you want to play this someday. When white connects, black has to protect the corner. Therefore, he has to extend, and now we can cut black here. Now here, usually we see black plays the empty triangle. It's an ugly shape, but black plays it anyway. The reason you play it is because you don't really want to struggle here, because white can extend. When you play like this, well, white can just turn, and yes, you can capture the stones locally by playing Hane Connect, but this is not really a good exchange for black. Black was able to gain a little bit extra territory, but then white was able to obtain a lot of more influence as well. So the exchange is not good for black at all. And therefore, a lot of times you just see players play the empty triangle, and that's the main variation. Now white pushes down, and black keeps going. White push down again. It's very important for black to extend onto the first line, because that's the best for points. White Ataris, black has to do whatever it takes to not give up the stone. White pushes up, black extend up, and white plays the Kema. And this is the Joseki that we all kind of know or have seen, at least. And usually, I mean, if you check other commentators, be like, yeah, the Joseki ends here. But actually, it doesn't, because the book move continues, right? There's still a lot of book moves. So the book move for black is to play this Kema. So this is a very tricky move. This is trying to bait white into push and cut. If white push and cut, then black will just Atari and make a tiger's mouth. Now, this push and cut really helped black fix his shape, while also creating weaknesses in white's shape. Okay, so for example, this group is under a lot of pressure, and you probably have to get out in some sort of way. Let's say, for example, you try to get out like this. Then black has another push and cut. Probably he won't do it immediately, but this is very severe, as you can see. At this point, probably he just like play a small knight, exchange a few moves, and then aim at this push and cut later. So white has a lot of insecurities, and this group is also very insecure, and black only has to deal with this group in the center, and therefore this is an easier game for black moving forward. So push and cut for white would be falling into a trap, and therefore we don't see people push and cut here. Rather, white needs to settle the group over here. And then here's a very interesting difference, right? For a lot of players, they'll be like, okay, I'll just play a 3-space extension, right? Anywhere, like, oh, the high or the low, like, I don't really care. But apparently this matters a lot, right? So if you play the three space high extension, it's an okay move, but I personally don't recommend it because later on, when black plays the invasion or approach, and then if you don't respond to this, there's a very serious local follow-up. Black is gonna peep in, and this makes white very awkward because your stone is on the fourth line. Now, if you play the Kosumi, then black is gonna clamp. This is a very nice Tsuji. And now if you try to connect, black will capture your stone in Sente because there's another push and cut. So you have to fix that problem, but then black was able to get all that in Sente, and now white doesn't have enough ice space, and white also has to run. So this is a very serious local follow-up. Now, for example, if you play the attach on top, black still has this move, right? This is still very annoying. When white connects, black can just jump back like this, not only helping his approaching stone, but also getting rid of the roots that white has, and white has to run for his life as well. So it's a very severe follow-up. And therefore, what I recommend to my viewers is to play the low three space extension, and this leaves no weakness, right? For example, now if you try to poke me, then I can just play the crawl. Now, because my stone is very well placed right now, then, black can't really do much about this shape. So white is very secure like this. Okay, so that's the difference between the low and the high. And at this point, one other final thing I want to say is that black pushes on top and white jumps, and that's the end of the Joseki. And the book would tell you that this is an equal position because black got the territory, but of course white got influence on both sides. And black has an insecure group in the center, so it's very unclear, and therefore it's very dynamically equal position. But it's very, very important for you to realize that in order for you to play this Joseki, you have to make sure that this is a white stone instead of a black stone. Because if this is a black stone, this makes it very awkward for white. I don't like this position for white, and I think white is just objectively worse here because of this stone. Your influence is facing a black stone. So when black plays a move, it's like you can't really build over here, and the direction is just wrong. Okay, so the reason I'm mentioning this is like when you choose Mies Joseki, the direction matters quite a lot. Now, let's illustrate this, Joseki once again. Let's try a different variation. Let's try a different direction. Okay, so we'll just play out this Joseki so we can review it while we learn about direction. So when black honeys, white connects, that's our main variation. Black extends down, white cuts, and then we have this happening, Atari, push, Kema. Okay, and then we secure our group on top. When black push, then we jump. And now we can see that this stone is helping our group here to build an influence. And this is very good for white. And you can choose this Joseki like this, no problem. But previously, if it's the wrong direction, it wasn't a great choice. In the last lecture, we covered white's connect over here. That's one of the main variations. It is a main variation, but it's actually very simple. I think in my lecture I explained pretty much everything, and I think it should be pretty intuitive. And I talked about the details, whether you should play the high three space extension or low extension, and also in terms of direction of play. So today we'll be looking at a very similar variation that is for white to fix it with a tiger's mouth. So the idea is the same. White wants to sacrifice the three stones over here to gain outside influence, but in a slightly different way. Black will still extend, white cuts, and black follows the same logic of just capturing the corner. Here, white cannot choose the previous variation by attaring here. This would be a bad variation for white because now we can see that the tiger's mouth is a lot worse than simply connecting after this. If we still follow the same Joseki, black can throw in here. White takes, black ataris, and white has to connect. And now we can see there's a very serious liberty problem for white, and this is just not pleasant. So the idea of white playing the tiger's mouth is to not atari like this. Rather, white's correct move is to play an extension towards the top. So that's a more practical way of playing. Now here, black can follow up by limiting white's development over this direction. And now white plays a shape move, completely controlling the black stone over here. So now this is not a great time for black to really drag out a stone, because then white can attack the stone. As you can see, this is not a great fight for black because white has so many stones surrounding the two stones. And and these guys are just outnumbered. So it's better for black to just leave it hanging here. And then white wouldn't really spend a move to try to capture it either, because now the outside, there's so many big moves, right? So when black approaches, you probably have to answer. And then at this point, it's just a game, right? Locally, this is there's a ceasefire over here, and we're just playing somewhere else. And the result of this is black gained the territory, white temporarily controlled the stone over here and gained some side influence. So that is pretty much the only difference between white connecting and playing the tiger's mouth. And then the tiger's mouth is not very it's not very common. You don't see this a lot in the Mies Joseki, and I think a lot of players simply just don't know this move, but it's actually a very common or I would say it's a very main variation, where the idea is not to Atari, rather to play the two space extension, right? And then spend another move to control the stone over here. So if you love influence, then this is definitely a good position for you. This main variation is actually very simple, but I do want to spend a little bit more time to talk about the local follow-up so you guys feel absolutely comfortable with this particular variation. So one of the possibilities is what I just said. Black will play the big knight. The idea is to stay very practical and take the territory in the corner. White spends another move to control black stone. So later on, what the players are fighting for is basically black is trying to drag the stone out at some point in the game, very later on in the game, not right now. And then white's job is basically to say, hey, your stone is pretty much dead, right? All of this influence belong to me. So the players will be fighting for this stone at some point later on in the game, and that's a dynamically equal position. The other possibility is for black to directly drag out. This is also a very legit follow-up for black. The idea is to not let white control the stone and create insecurities on both sides. So black is investing in this guy, dragging it out, and causing trouble for both sides. That's also a very good idea. White will follow up with the extension. So this is always the shape move against an extension like this. I'm pretty sure you already know. And at this point, black plays the Hane. The idea of this Hane is to protect this cutting point so he can play the Kema after. White plays with a shape move. This is a really good move in terms of ice space and shape. The reason this is a great move is that later on this block is a sente against the corner, and therefore the shape move is the second line. Black follows up, and now we have white having this very brilliant move, looking at the weaknesses that black has, and also expand towards the top, and then also kind of get himself out. This is a very nice move if you're an aggressive player. If you're not so aggressive, playing a move that connects your moyo, or let's say this stone is a black stone, then you can extend yourself out, making sure this group is safe with a little bit of territory. Both options are very good. You can choose according to your style. So at this point, we covered the two simplest variations, that is for white to connect and white to play the tiger's mouth. And then the result is more or less similar, where both players settle down and there's no huge fights, and then it's just a peaceful game moving on. So next up, we're going to be talking about the two remaining very complex variations, and this is pretty much like most of my series will be about. One of them is to Atari on the second line, and the other one is the famous Mies Joseki, and the flying knife Joseki, basically. So we're gonna, in the next lecture, we'll start with our third main variation, that is the Atari on the second line. This is a very tricky variation as well, very unknown. I guess not a lot of amateur players even know how to handle this. So if you know, this gives you a huge advantage. So we'll talk about that in the next lecture. This is the first lecture for the third main variation, that is for white to play the Atari on the second line. This variation is a main variation, but it's very uncommon, and then you don't see this very often especially amateur level games. And if you play a variation like this and you know the theory behind, then it's very easy for you to gain an advantage or even just knock out your opponent right here. When white plays the Atari, the first move that black doesn't want to play is to play this extension here. The reason you don't want to play the extension as black is white is going to respond with a jump over here, which is a move that is very valuable for white because it fixes the weakness over here, while your extension doesn't really fix your weakness. That is this cutting point over here. And therefore, this extension is simply a bad exchange for black. So black only has one move right now, that is to extend. Otherwise, when white gets the tiger's mouth, black's corner is going to die. So black needs to extend into the corner. And now the idea for us doing this exchange as white is that we don't want to play the flying knife Joseki anymore. We don't want to connect. We don't want to play the tiger's mouth. Rather, we want to just cut black off. And now, as you can see, thanks to our Atari here, there's no more ladder going on. So if black plays the cut, then white will Atari. Black extends, and now white will simply capture the two stones. Now black lost so much over here. Now let's see if black can get any compensation. Black plays the Atari, white captures, and when black Ataris here, it's very important for white just to give up the two stones. If you connect, black will play the Hane, and since the ladder here doesn't work for white, white's probably just dead inside. Therefore, white's correct move is to play the small knight. When black takes, we can take one stone back. The result of this is obviously horrible for black, even if black was able to connect the two groups. The problem is black is not completely alive. Later on, you can pretty much see the shape like this. When white crawls into the corner, black is not really alive. And white gained a lot of profits over here. Black is not alive. White also has profits towards the right side, and eventually we can attack this group. So this is not acceptable at all for black. If black plays like this, you're pretty much going to be winning the game. It's a winning position for for Dan level player, I would say. So when white cuts over here, the only move is for black to play the empty triangle and get out. Well, in case black decides to play the Atari instead of a main variation of empty triangle, let's see what variation this will lead to. White extends, black has to connect, and now white obviously will turn here. Now, the idea for black to do this is not really to capture the stones over here, because the only goal for you to play like this is to capture some extra point, then the compensation that white got on the outside is just way more than what you gain inside. Okay, so even if white doesn't ladder white can play like this, and then white controls the entire outside. And more importantly, thanks to the Atarian stone, white is extremely thick, and black's corner is not going to compensate for it. The correct move is for black to actually exploit white's weakness by cut and extending, forcing white to push on top. Here, there's a ladder, therefore white has to break that ladder. Black Ataris, white takes, and then black plays a Hane. So white cannot really Atari because black can connect with an Atari, and therefore white plays the shape move. Black Ataris, white comes back and capture the 4 stones, and then black will spend an extra move to take. So this is a very niche variation. The result of this is that this is locally worse for black. Okay, so this position is slightly better for white. You have to remember that. And the only reason black would play like this is if black really wants to develop on the right side, right? Let's say you have a black stone over here. Let's say for whatever reason I'm just illustrating, okay? For whatever reason you have something like this, then yeah, you can pretty much play like this, but I just have to say that locally this is worse for black. Okay, so that's a niche variation that you kind of need to know how to play. But it doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, you'll encounter your opponent play the empty triangle. Here, there are 2 main variations. The first is the simpler variation. Since you're watching my Flying Knight or Mies Joseki, I use them interchangeably. Okay, so Mies Joseki means the Flying Knife Joseki. In Chinese, it's the Mies Joseki. So, of course, when you're watching, lectures like this, you want complication, you want to trick your opponent. right? Into very complicated fights so you can gain an advantage. But I just want to present, because I want to give you a full guide on the Joseki, therefore I will just play out the one of the main variations that leads to very simple outcome, where white just pushes through, black extends all the way on the first line, and now white plays a shape move, that is to play the jump here. So the result of this is that black gains some gain the corner, okay, and but the corner, comparing to like previously when you had the connect or the tiger's mouth, black's corner is slightly smaller because white was able to gain this move. White is also better on the outside because white plays a move like this. So this is a shape move, right? Before we had a tiger's mouth, but this move is like way better in terms of shapes. The only thing that white lost was a sente, right? So white lost the extra move to gain this Atari and gain a better shape move. And then from just analyzing whether it's better or worse, it turns out to be worth it for white, right? It turns out to be still at equal game. So white doesn't really lose any win rate by just trading one move for some extra benefits. Now, if you want to know what happens next, is that black will play the extension here. White plays the 2-space extension, and then if black jumps on top, this will make the group here very comfortable. Problem with this is white gets another 2-space extension, and therefore makes more territory and also the group more secure. So normally, if you're playing against a high-level opponent, likely he's going to pincer you, making sure that you are not alive either. But of course, the problem with that is that when white jumps out, the two black stones also feel the pressure and has to jump as well. White jumps again, and then black jumps again. And then at this point, I think it's just a game, right? Like we're just playing the game of Go, and black is kind of under attack, but it's not easy to attack. We're kind of out as well, but we're also not completely alive. Here, to follow up, we can try something like taking profits. So whenever we're in a fight, we always have to think about, whenever we can Tanuki, we also always have to think about just taking profits on the outside. So if you like this position as white and you don't want to get into complications, then this could be an interesting variation for you to choose. But of course, we're here not for simple variations. So let's get into the complicated part. When black plays the triangle, white now Atari's on top. Black extends, and then instead of sacrificing the corner and make black's life simple, we're not going to do that. We're going to crawl our group out, and this is very exciting. Black, of course, has to turn, and then we crawl once again. So the main variation when you don't have the ladder over here is to play the crawl. You might be wondering, whoa, what the hell am I talking about? Like, what is the ladder? We will talk about this in great details. When you have a ladder, let's say you have a stone over here, then you can choose this variation. And this is way trickier than this tricky variation that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so in this case, we don't have the ladder, and we're going to be focusing on this main variation. That is for white to simply crawl. Black extends, and then we have to crawl again because we have to survive. Here, the main variation is for black to simply Atari and try to leave the corner. But you might be wondering, what happens when black plays the Hane and just tries to kill our group over here? We'll answer this in the next video. In the last lecture, we said that black's correct move is to Atari and settle the corner. But a lot of the times your opponent, it doesn't matter which rank, unless he's a professional. If he's an amateur level player, very likely he's going to play the block here, because it looks like tactically black can hold on the outside. And actually he's right, black can hold on the outside. So white will definitely follow up with a cut. Black will have to extend. And here you should not make the mistake to try to struggle on the outside, because black can defend no matter how you struggle. The idea for white is actually simple here. It's just to kill the corner. Since black didn't play this vital move, then we will just crawl into the corner and kill black. So here there's some life and death to do, but it's actually very simple. If black plays the Atari, squeezing our liberty, then we can just connect. And now you can see that thanks to this cutting point, black now has to take, and then we can have this beautiful Tsuji of Ataring into a 2-2, and it's a very clean kill for black. It doesn't matter how black struggles here. Problem is, we're threatening to Atari here. If you play a fake Tsuji, then we can just throw in. When you take, I can just Atari from behind, and therefore it's a game over. So at this point, this is a clean kill for white. Okay, so it's four liberties versus 3 liberties. There's no Tsuji going on. The best hope is for black to just play the turn on the outside. In this case, we can let black gain this pleasant move, no problem, because we already claimed the corner. So in terms of territory, white is doing fantastic, and this is just a leading game for white. Still playable for black, I think, because black is able to gain some influence towards the top. The problem is this stone is not completely dead, right? We're not going to run it anytime in the near future, but eventually the fact that black didn't capture this stone completely will give us some value. So this is a better game, and I think a lot of my viewers would actually prefer white here. So that's how you handle, at this point, that's how you handle if black Atari is here. What if black blocks over here? Well, then that's simple. Since black didn't take this vital point, then we will take it. White will end up having 6 liberties, and there's no way black has 6 liberties in the corner. Doesn't matter what Tsuji you play, you just won't have 6 liberties, and there's no way that white can lose this liberty fight. So at the end of the day, no matter what, we will kill the corner, we'll have the territory, and it's just that. Like that's just the simple idea, right? We're just gonna be leading because we killed the corner, basically. Okay, so that's one way for your opponent to fall into a trap, that is to play the Hane here. So the correct move is for black to let white get the Hane, right? This is a very pleasant Hane, but black has no choice but to basically live the corner. White plays the Hane, and now this is another place where your opponent might be very confused and he doesn't know what to do. Very easy to make a mistake. So the absolute accurate move is for black to play the Hane here, but I mean, I don't think anyone would play this move because this is not a sente against the side here. White can come back and capture the stone. So now black, this is not going to work for black anymore because white was able to exchange this move with this move, and therefore it's very difficult for black to fight here. So black has to Atari on top, white connects, and now thanks to our, basically it's almost like as if we made a wedge and connect, and now our liberties are just like way longer. When black blocks over here, then we can play the Hane. Black has to block if he wants to have any chance to fight this. Then we can attach into the corner. Black Hanes. White now extends, and now as we can see, we have black has to rely on this ko, and then we can just connect. Okay, so at the end of the day, white is just gonna have more liberties. Black can try to hold on with this ko, but it's so hard for black because black has less liberties, and there's still a cutting point on the outside. So eventually, basically we can consider that black's corner is just dead, right? Because white just has so many liberties, so it's probably a few steps ko. In terms of the outside, white also has a very nice side to develop on towards the right. So even if AI would say, oh, well, this is okay for black, but I think for a human player, it's very hard to understand why this is equal. So this is definitely a very good variation for you to get into as well. But I don't think any human players, unless they studied this variation, would think about playing this move over here, which is the correct move. When I saw this, and I didn't even understand it. So I think most human players would just take, which is also a very good move. And if you're playing as black in this situation, I would recommend you to play this move as well. So against this move, white will extend. That's obviously a sente. Black captures, and now white can come back and play the tiger's mouth to fix the weaknesses here. Maybe you'll have an AI software telling you to play weird moves like this, but I mean, no. I want you to feel comfortable, okay? I want to introduce variations that are comfortable. I mean, what does this, like, it's just so scary, right? When black, of course, the idea is that black can't cut right now because you have to run here first. But after some attack, this is still a very serious problem. So You can maybe exchange this and then play the tiger's mouth, but eventually this move has to be played. As you can see, obviously, there are too many weaknesses. So you could play here, threatening, and then just come back. That's a good sequence. But the idea, as long as you get the idea correct here, I think you'll be fine, right? It's just to play the tiger's mouth and secure your influence towards the right side. So the result of this is that white is out now, and then black only has one eye and has to run towards the center. So, uh, so we can safely say that this white group is a little bit more comfortable than the black group in the center. We have a nice influence versus territory towards the right side, and black gets the sente. So this is more or less an equal position as well. The idea for white here is to use black's insecurity over here to attack black and then basically guide black towards direction where you want to build territory. For example, if black plays like this is just illustration purposes, okay? So if black runs this way, then we can build territory in this direction. So the idea, as I said, is to attack black and gain profits in the process. There is a couple of things, very important things that I want to point out is that now I have played an exchange between white and black. Okay, so in this case, if you're choosing the Atari variation, and then when black extends and you cut, okay, let's say we play out the same variation when white Ataris, black extends, and then we still fight out like this. Okay, it's the exact same variation. Everyone plays properly. White honeys, black takes, white extend up, and then black captures. And then we go back and fix our weakness on the third line. Here, there's a difference. Now, since black has a helping stone over here, this makes our group a little bit more vulnerable. So I wouldn't recommend white to play this position if black has a stone over here for whatever reason, because black has this continuation that is going to limit our eye space, forcing us to run with black. And now because this turn is a sente for black, this makes our group kind of dangerous. So if you want to fight this out, okay, you can. If you're a fighter, you're like, hey, I absolutely love this position for whatever reasons, then you can try it out in your casual games. But this won't be objectively good for white because of how it was set up. So in this case, the best choice is for you to choose the simpler variation. That is for white. You basically block all the way and then jump over here. Black extends and we play the 2-space extension. If black pincers us, then we go back to the same variation where black jumps and then we jump a couple times and then we take the move on the outside. Or we, in this case, since black is quite strong here, maybe we'll hop into the center. Maybe we'll keep putting pressure against black. It's all your choice, all right? You're free to do whatever you like to do. So usually if black has a stone here, black would jump on top. But in this case, the idea is for us to get out or to get out in a different way. And those are all fine. Okay, so you can play out like this as white. So of course, this is kind of the end of the Atari variation when we don't have a ladder. Okay, so now let's set it up in a different way. Let's start from the very beginning. Let's say, for example, this time we're gonna have a different variation, right? Let's say, for example, we have something like this, and then black plays out the. Let's just finish the Joseki here anyway. So let's say we have a normal shape like this, and then we are playing the Mies Joseki over here, okay? And then it's kind of like a review of the stuff. Okay, black honeys, and we play the main variation, Atari. Black extends, and now we cut. Black still plays like this. It's at this very point, instead of playing the crawl on the second line, Miyutin 9P, the inventor of the flying knife Joseki, the reason it was part of the reason that was named after him is because that at this point he discovered a new move that is to play the hane on the third line, and this would be the main variation when the ladder works for black. So what's going to happen when white plays this variation? We'll leave that to the next lecture. In the last lecture, I said if white has the ladder over here, white can play the Hane on the third line instead of crawling. This is an upgraded Joseki for white, meaning that this is purely better for white now, comparing to the last Joseki slightly. Okay, black can still defend it, but it's just more powerful for white. Black turns. So black, obviously, in terms of shape, you just can't play this capture because black crawls on the second line. When you Atari, white connects. When you go back to live the corner, I can Atari and then clamp on the third line. And this is very awkward for black. Black's shape is in trouble. If black pushes through, white's going to cut, and you can tell this is not going to work for black. Black is just broken into pieces, both groups having 2 liberties. There's no way black can get away from this fight, and it's probably just a matter of time before black resigns. So shape is very important in the game of Go, and this shows you, this Joseki basically shows you that. So black cannot capture, black has to turn here, and now white connects. Now, if this is the first time your opponent seeing this Joseki, then he might just be feeling hopeless because he doesn't know what to do. There's a Miai. White's going to ladder the 2 stones here because we have planned for it. And then white is going to clamp on the second line and capture the 5 stones over here. And of course, after a long time of thinking, he'll realize, well, this group is obviously more important. You obviously can't allow the 5 black stones to die. And likely he's going to play like this. And then we happily ladder the stones here. Right? Maybe black's going to play a ladder breaker, but I don't even care. We just capture, and we have a new clear center over here. And then this is just getting scary. And then the compensation black's going to get on top is not going to compensate with this. This is pretty much a, how can I say that? It's not, probably not winning, but it's a huge lead, right? It's absolutely huge lead. So then what did black play wrong here, right? How did black even get to this situation? I mean, why is it so tough? Well, the reason is that black didn't really play anything wrong. Black just needs to know what needs to happen next. The correct move for black to play is to Atari first, making sure white cannot ladder black 2 stones right away, and then save the 5 stones on the left side. When black turns here, there are basically 2 variations. The first one, well, regardless which one, white will play the Hane first, blocking black, threatening to squeeze here and kill black here. Black has 2 variations from this point on. So black can simply Atari and capture white, right? If white doesn't need to connect because it's still 2 versus 2 and black plays first. So here white will play the jump move. It's a shape move, protecting the cutting point a little bit, but more importantly, controlling the stone in the center. Black drags the stone out, we push on top, and now black plays the jump here, right? So at this point, white can actually have the time to capture. Okay, if black pushes and cut, white's gonna Atari first, and then there's a Tsuji that we all know that black cannot escape anymore. So black cannot cut, but black can jump here, fixing his own shape, and then white plays another move to protect this very severe cutting point. The result of this is that white has a very strong influence towards the right side, and then white's shape is way better than black shape. At least white has some sort of ice space, and it's on the side, has a 2-space extension waiting for him, but black is just dancing by himself in the center. So I think this position is slightly better for white. Although they call this a Joseki, I personally prefer white, and I think objectively this is also better for white. And then, as you can tell, black pretty much played everything properly. Like there's not a major mistake, but somehow because of how complicated Mies Joseki or Flying Knight Joseki is, black just falls a little bit behind. And that's kind of what's amazing about Game of Go. Now, another variation that I need to mention is a very interesting variation that for black to cut over here. White will Atari on top, black extends, and now white Ataris the 2 black stones. Black cannot run anymore in this case. If you run, white's gonna Atari, black extends, and now white crawls on the second line. Black has no choice but to spend an extra move, making sure that these guys don't come back for the counter kill. But at this point, white can just Atari the stone and ladder it. It's not even a ladder because even the ladder doesn't work. We can just clamp, jump, and net the stones. So The result of this is, of course, very terrible for black because this group will be under attack for a very long time. The corner is not very big because of our beautiful stone placed here. We gained a lot of influence towards the top. This is unacceptable for black. So that's why black cannot run anymore. If he runs, this will be falling into a trap. It's a very big trap, actually. So the correct move is for black to play the Kosumi. That's the most accurate move. The reason this is the best move is because locally, black kills white here. And therefore, there's no reason for black to add an extra move to double secure the group over here, right? So this is definitely the most efficient move. And in fact, a lot of your opponent might play a mistake like this. This would be a very big mistake, actually, because this move is a lot less efficient than the Kosumi over here. Okay, so that's an interesting detail. But regardless of the details, we get to capture the 2 stones here, and this just cleanses our group over here. And as you can see, this is just a giant pillar. It's a giant nuclear center, and then means that our group on the right is just blessed with it. And this is pretty much territory, right? Like if black plays something like this, I mean, this is probably dead. I mean, just because how thick it is, right? Black can't even play something like this. Probably the best black will play is like something like this, right? Even this black has to watch out. White might actually just attack. So you can see the value of your influence. When it's this thick, it's like a nuclear center that the black cannot, black has to take very, very seriously. So this is, I personally think this is a slightly better position for white as well. But I think this is actually equal because black was also able to gain a lot of territory. So still depends on how you play. I personally definitely like white better. And think many of my viewers would find that it's more interesting to play as white here as well. So I want to add a few details before we summarize everything. So at this point, I want to show you that the ladder, right? So I know some of my viewers might sometimes have issues with reading ladder. So I'm just going to like play it out and show you that, this stone is actually helping out. And also you can tell that if this, so our stone is approaching a 3-4. But if it was approaching a 4-4 start point, then it would work as well. So as long as you have a stone around this area, you should be good to go, even without this stone. Okay, so that's the first thing. Just to assure you what ladder I'm talking about, and then you can kind of plan it before. So it's almost like an ambush. You're trying to ambush your opponent with a stone over here. So I just said, approaching the start point would do just the same. So you can plan this Joseki very early on, right? You can plan it pretty much at this point, right? I mean, all these are kind of forced at this point. When we Atari, this is already a shock to our opponent if he has not seen this very much. Then we cut, right? And then at this point, we play the Hani here. This is a very shocking move, right? Normally, your opponent would expect you to crawl on the second line. But then you play the Hane, which is Mi's secret weapon at the time. He played this against Kujie, I think, at the time. And then he managed to trick Kujie. And then Kujie, I think, in the game has fallen into his trap. So black turns, and when we connect, it looks very, very difficult for black, especially if your opponent is seeing this for the first time. Right? There's a Mi eye. So he has to figure out, first of all, oh, okay, I can use this Atari, which locally is very bad for black, this exchange. But then he really has no choice. And then black can turn here. And when we Hane, he needs to know the 2 main variations. One is for him to Atari and then gain more. When white plays the Atari, he knows that he has to know to not run the stones out, rather play the most efficient move. And this is the accurate move. Anything else would just be worse. Then when we capture this position, it's already slightly better for us, especially if we have helping stones over here. Okay. So that's first variation. And the second variation is black calmly goes back and leaves some weakness for white, but then we can just jump out. Black extends, we block on top. Black doesn't have the liberties to go for the push and cut. He jumps out, we take, jump once again, and finally we come back and fix our weakness. And this position is also slightly more comfortable for white. So it turns out that the Mi's Joseki with the second line Atari variation is very good if we have if we have helping stones over here, that helps the ladder. Okay, so in your tournament, don't tell this to anybody else. In your tournament, you can set up a trap like this where you play two moves or one move. Even one move would work, as we have seen. And then you play out this Atari on the second line, Joseki. Assuming your opponent, goes into the Mies Joseki with you, I hope. I pray for you, and then it doesn't matter how black plays. I think you will always get a comfortable position for white, right? So black would always feel a little bit uncomfortable, even if he plays perfectly. So it's one of those situations where it's just gonna be slightly better for you no matter what. So that's kind of our summary as well for this particular variation. So far we have covered quite a bit. We have covered the tiger's mouth and the connect, and I personally think, although they're legit variations, I don't think you came here for this, right? So what you really came here for is the Hane here, which is the most complicated Joseki in the world for Go. This is so complicated, and we'll spend a lot of videos on this. I'll help you craft some of the secret weapons that you can use in your tournaments, and you can also, after the entire series, do a review and maybe study a little bit on your own and craft your own secret weapons as well. So we'll get that started in the next lecture. So starting this lecture, we will be introducing the most complex and the fourth main variation, that is the main variation in the Flying Knife Joseki or Mies Joseki, for white to Hane on top. And this contains hundreds and hundreds of variations. White Hane is on top, and black obviously has to take care of the double Atari, right? Even if you capture the 3 stones, if you somehow let me capture the stone over here, then that would be game over because white is just too thick on the outside. If black just connects, this is not a great move because it doesn't put as much pressure on white, and therefore white can pressure black's corner. The Joseki move is for black to play a tiger's mouth, and as you can see, this is an upgrade from the connecting because with this tiger's mouth, white's 3 stones, it's a lot harder to escape. So against this move, white will follow up with the tiger's mouth, obviously pressuring the corner. This is just an obvious move. Here, black's only move is to connect the stone on the second line and extend liberties. If black plays the Hane, white will follow up with a double Hane. Black connects, and now white captures the stone on the second line. Now black is down to 3 liberties. So black has to try to kill the corner as quickly as he can, and therefore he managed to squeeze white down to 3 liberties as well. White well played Hane, that's a sente. Okay, so here the life and death or the liberty fight is that if white plays like this, black actually has a Tsuji, and now white is clean dead because of the liberty shortage that white has over here. Okay, you can verify by yourself that, it's black kills white. And that's why you will see white playing the Hane. This forces black to block, and now we can Atari on top, black connects, and then white connects on top. The result of this is terrible for black because, first of all, white has a giant influence towards the right side. Black barely has anything. There's pretty much no influence because white has stones extending towards this influence, basically. In the corner, it's still a 50-50. So what's going to compensate for white's tremendous influence over here? The answer is nothing because white might actually kill black in the corner, right? It's a 50-50. And then if white ever kills black in the corner, and then this group has to run for its life. So this would be a terrible variation. And that's why black would not play the Hane at 2-2. The main and the correct variation is for black to connect. So at this point, there are many variations that will follow, and we'll spend a lot of videos on them. So namely, we'll first be covering white's Hane over here. You probably haven't seen this variation before, but we'll cover that. This is one of the more niche variations. We'll cover a main variation that is to play the tiger's mouth, obviously very intuitive, protecting all the weaknesses. And then we'll be talking about the flying knife, the most complicated Joseki, that is to play. That's to leave like 1,000,000 cutting points on the outside and then try to pressure both groups. So very exciting content ahead. None of these variations are easy, but let's start today with the Hane in the corner. So since white takes the corner, black has no choice but to cut on the outside. This will make sure that the 6 stones what black has here is safe. Now we have a double Atari, there's another Atari, so black is safe. White Ataris, black connects, and now there's several variations for white. So first of all, there's so many cutting points, right? So it's impossible to like capture black stones here unless white fix some of the cutting points. One of the ways is for white to connect on top, right? This would put more pressure on black's group over here. Now, black cannot just cut here because white can actually connect, right? While you think you can just capture the 5 stones, white will actually fight this out. And then we realize that this is just burden because, first of all, there's a lot of aji here, so let's just play a few moves when this happens. Then, well, I think we can Atari once and get out. Or it doesn't matter what you play. The idea is that these 2 stones will probably die because black still has to spend an extra move to get himself out. And therefore, this is not a great variation for black. So it looks like black has a lot of weaknesses, but Ataring here doesn't really work. And of course, Ataring here doesn't really work either because white doesn't really care about these 2 stones, right? If you capture, then I play another move, and this group is dead, and then this is a huge loss for black. So black cannot rush to Atari any of the stones. Rather, he just spends another move to get himself out. And white will turn. Black extends. White keeps pushing. So after pushing a few times, white will come back and play a second line move. This is very important because if white doesn't care about this locally, then black has an Atari. White connects, and then black plays a tiger's mouth. This is a lot of points for black. As you can tell, there's a lot of more points that black gained over this region. But more importantly, this is a sente. This forces white to save the corner. If you don't save the corner, then there's a 1 move that kills white. That is to play the 1-2 Tsuji. So that is to tell you that the secret of this Joseki is that this move on the second line, it looks really small, but actually it's a very big move that you have to play very early. The result of this is a slightly better position for black. I personally prefer black as well because, first of all, black got a nice strip of territory over here. And also, black was able to get this out. And then white's corner is not really that big, and the center has a minor issue with these cutting points. So the result of this is not so great for white. Well, it's still playable, but it's not so great. So that's one of the niche variations that white can play. The other niche variation is for white to connect here. This is a trickier variation. So first of all, this is a trap, right? If black just tried to run, then white can extend the stone out, and then all of a sudden black is dead here. So this is a sente against the group over here, and therefore black needs to play an Atari. So at this point, white goes ahead and attack black's 5 stones. And the Tsuji for black to get out is to play the second line attached. It's a very nice Tsuji. So if white plays the Hane, black will extend the stone back. This is a sente because white has a very severe cutting point, and therefore white connects. Black Ataris, and then plays the tiger's mouth. Once again, because of life and death issues, white has to spend an extra move to make sure that he lives. And then as we can see, it's black sente, and therefore black takes the initiative and cut white into 2 groups. And this is a very bad position for white because both groups are very insecure. And then black is very secure, right? This is a miai of capturing and then capturing. So this group is perfectly fine. This group is already alive. Black only needs to worry about running this stone, while white has to worry about 2 groups. So that's a very big leading game for black. So white cannot really play the Hane here. So a better move is for white just to extend and expose less weaknesses. So at this point, black will cut on the outside. So instead of directly trying to live, our idea is to get a counterattack going. And it's a very important idea in a game of Go, of course. At this point, white has several responses. Let's look at a few of them. If white turns here, blocking the second line exit, then black can Atari. White extends, black keeps pushing, and of course here, white cannot really block because then white extend creates a miai of laddering and then clamp over here and capturing the group over here. Therefore, white needs to extend once again. Black will exchange this move, forcing white to jump out, and then black pushes and then cut on top. Now, as you can see, white's shape is terrible. So white needs to play an empty triangle to get out, and now black can pull stone back. This is a sente. We're trying to Atari and block, and therefore white has to fix it. Black can follow the same combination and force white to come back and live. Now, the result of this is that black lives, white lives, almost the same amount of points. Black's group is very solid, but white is broken into pieces. There's so many groups hanging. Black can start a fight by dragging over here, by playing the Kosumi over here. There's many, many ways black can fight here. But the idea is that black is going to fight here immediately because white is so weak and there's so many things that black can do. So this would also be a very big leading game for black. So white turning on the second line doesn't really work. Well, what about white playing the Hane? Well, against this move, black will first extend. This is always black's right. White jumps, and then black plays the Atari. White pulls the stone out, black Atari, connect, and then black crawls. White really wants to crawl the stone back, but the problem is there's a ladder, right? If games plays like this, white is going to die. So white doesn't really have the time. Rather, he has to extend once again. Black Ataris, white blocks, and then black follows the same sequence. And now we can see white pretty much has to play another move and live the corner. There's always a life and death problem in a corner. And now it's black's turn. So black can start initiative by playing here. If white's shape move is probably play the tiger's mouth, but then it's very easy game, right? Black plays a move that encloses territory and also put white in a tough spot. So very pleasant game for black in this situation as well. So we said that the Hane doesn't work, the turn doesn't work. What about white plays the block over here? Well, against this move, same exchange, and then black curls on the second line. For the exact same reason, white cannot really play the Hane because after this, we still have the same ladder, okay? So this variation doesn't work for white. The best way for white to handle this is to play the shape move that prevents the cutting point. Black will crawl, and now white plays the extension, sorry. The extension trying to cut black off. And then this looks like a sente, but here's the interesting part. A lot of times you will feel like your game it's difficult, right? Like it seems like a sente, and you have to connect, and then white extend, and then you have to crawl on the second line, but you know it's terrible, and then you just like stuck. So that happens to me a lot, right? I don't know if it happens to you a lot or not, but this feeling of getting stuck, and the reason we're stuck is because a lot of times we are not seeing the big picture. This looks like a sente, but no one says it has to be a sente. Rather, black here can make a sacrifice by playing on the outside. White cuts, and now black plays another move, squeezing white's liberty. White has to play the Atari. So the result of this is that black sacrificed the 5 stones, but white gained, black lost the group over here, but black gained a lot of influence towards the outside. These 2 stones have a lot of value because this Atari is a sente. So pretty much the top influence is controlled by black, right? Let's say black just plays a Senrensei, which is, it's a very outdated move. But even if black plays an outdated move like this, you can see that because later on, this is a sente, right? Black doesn't even have to play it immediately. We can see a giant moyo forming. At the end of the day, white only has this much territory, okay? It's something, but it's not like the end of the world for black. This group is pretty much, it's very secure, and black has a lot to work with. So this would be a leading game for black, actually. Okay, so a lot of times, if you just play a sacrifice, you might end up in a really good position. So at this point, white's most resilient move is probably to extend out. And this move looks very good. It's a shape move, and it's very resilient against black's attack. So how is black going to deal with such a tough move? We'll leave that to the next video. In the last lecture, we have showed several variations for white that don't work. So in particular, I forgot one of the very interesting variations when white plays that. What I said is when black plays like this, white squeeze, black play here, white plays like this, then we sacrifice. And then this is a better position for black. Of course, this exchange already happened, and then black plays like this, black builds on top. A little recap. But of course, you might have a question. What if white just extends? This is actually a very important variation as well. So I'll just cover that right now. So black plays the Kosumi. That's the correct move. Now, this is looking at the Atari. The reason black cannot play like this is because white has this very annoying Hane here. You can't really let white do this. So it's important for us to save an extra liberty. And now when white plays Hane, we can cut over here. It's no problem. Against this move, white obviously will prevent black from getting the shape. Black pulls the stone back, white turns, and now black makes himself alive. So first of all, we have to live this group at whatever cost. And once black lives the group, then this cutting point is very serious. Of course, you can exchange this anytime. Okay, so make sure you did that. This is always a great exchange for black. So black comes back and live, and now it's a problem for white. This group is very weak actually because black is quite okay here. And this group looks strong, but then when black pincers from the top, it also has to run for its life. So a very awkward situation. More importantly, white has to address the corner, and the best Tsuji is for him to play this move. This would live the corner, but this is a sente against this group. Okay, if you don't play, white's gonna squeeze here, and then black can't really live anymore. So what black can play this move. This move has value, not only lives, but creates liberty problems for these two white stones, making the poking very effective. So at this point, there are a lot of great moves for black to play, right? For example, so now the best move is probably for white to play a bamboo shape over here, making sure that this group is fine. And now black can just take the territory, right? Instead of fighting immediately, we can take more territory. And then these two stones are still going to run to create insecurities for both white groups. So this is a great variation for black. And the win rate is pretty high. And objectively, I think it's also a very good position for any player. Okay, so I covered all the variations for white blocks over here. Now we're going to be addressing what if white extends. Against this extension, black can simply exchange the two moves over here, forcing white to Hane the stone and try to kill black. Now, black is in trouble, of course, but black can actually just cut. When white Ataris, black Atari, white takes, and now black can cut in the corner and do a liberty fight against. And of course, as always, if we exchange this, it's always an okay in exchange. In this case, it's not necessarily like an amazing exchange, but it's an okay in exchange. You can play like that. Wait, but let's say we don't. Okay, let's say we cut directly. Let's just look at the liberty fight in the corner. White Ataris, black extends, and then white plays like this. Is a very common shape where we have a few throw-in to Tsujis. And then white has to take. This shortens white liberty by 1 for free. Black crawls to make sure white doesn't have two eyes. And white has to play the throw-in. If white plays the Atari, black will simply connect. And now white squeeze the liberty. Black can also squeeze an extra liberty. It looks like it's a ko, but when white throws in, we can take the stone back. And where's white gonna find any ko threat, right? Unfortunately, it just doesn't have any ko threat. So this move, for example, is not a co-threat. Black will simply just take again, and it's still nothing that white can do. Well, no co-threat means white is dead, right? If you can't win this ko, my next move, I'll capture you over here. So So that's why I said at here, white has to play the throw in to try to make a seki. Black takes, white squeezes, and now black in to nuki here because it's already a seki. Um, if white refuses the seki, it's going to be a very difficult ko for white. Let's read it out. So white plays here, we squeeze, you take, I take, and then you have to atsari, but then I atsari. Now, as we can see, it's like a one-step ko. Black doesn't have to, black can wait for one move and then start a ko, right? So think about it. But white is just one move and white is all dead. So that's not a great ko for white to start. And therefore, at this point, white will probably just take the seki here. This would be a seki, right, immediately. That's why black in Tanuki on the outside. But the problem is, if this is a seki, what I played is just like a random move, but the more aggressive is for black to push on top. Looking at this Atari, if white doesn't want to get Atari, then this group will be under a lot of pressure, probably going to die. So it's better for white just to get out and then suffer this. And then, as you can see, this is very unpleasant for white, right? The groups are very weak, and you have to keep them alive. If you don't keep them alive, this seki will disappear as well. So it's very heavy, and it's very dangerous for white. So that is pretty much the refutation against white extension over here. So black can pretty much Atari and block and then play out the way I did. And it's all force, right? Like I don't think any of these moves, I mean, at this point, white obviously has to capture the stone, and then we Atari, and then we cut in the corner. The entire sequence is forced. So white will just get into a very terrible situation. Yeah, pretty much by force. Okay, so that is how you refute the extension over here. It looks very strong, but actually it's not, right? We can gain an advantage if we play properly. So the conclusion, which is very important, is that at this point, when black plays the Tsuji, the attach on the second line, this is a very difficult situation for white, regardless of what white plays, right? The reason being that the weakness over here that white has. So what went wrong here, right? Like basically, the reason this is a little bit difficult for white is that this Hane is a little bit of a niche move or even a trick move, I would say. This is not the main variation for white. Probably at this point, the best chance that white has is to connect over here, letting black jump out, and then Atari on top, and just settle for a slightly inferior position. And then don't forget to play this very big move. It looks very small, but I explained this is a very big move. So white has to play that right now. And this would be more or less a equal position where black managed to equalize the win rates, right? Probably black is at like 51% at this point. So that's the niche variation. I think I covered the all the variations, well, not all the variations, but the main ideas in great details. So when black connects over here, next up we'll be looking at what if white plays the tiger's mouth. This is a very solid move that fixes all the problems on the right side, and it's one of the main moves. Now there will be a very fierce liberty fight in the corner, and we'll take a look at that liberty fight in the next lecture. Starting from this lecture, we'll be covering one of the very main variation in the flying knife Joseki, that is for white to play the tiger's mouth and fixing the right side. This would lead to many complex variations. Against this move, of course black has to protect the corner by playing the Hane. And then white needs to attach out, because these four guys are in trouble, so white needs to struggle here. So in this lecture, we will cover black's wedge over here. So it's not a move that you see often. Maybe it's normal that if this is the first time you're seeing this wedge, but apparently this is a niche variation, and then it could actually work for black, although uncommon. So against this wedge, the first variation is for white to either extend or Atari. But let's look at the most intuitive, that is to Atari on the first line. Against this move, black plays the Atari, white has to connect the two stones, Black Ataris from the outside, and now white takes back. Black does not have any co-threats, and therefore he connects. White also has to connect. So the reason, because no one has like threats at the very beginning of the game, and therefore this capture is very strong. So you might be wondering, well, doesn't white have like code threats over here? Well, let's play it out. If you just go ahead and cut, black is going to take. Well, you can play this, black will answer, but then after you take, black also has code threats thanks to white's cutting point. And then at this point, white needs to run, then I can take back, and then I can use the Atari again as my threat, and black just has a lot of threats. So and white has exhausted threat in the corner. Therefore, this is not going to work for white simply because white doesn't have enough co-threats. Okay, so this cutting point would be a very big overplay. White has to connect over here. And now black plays the tiger's mouth, fixing the cutting point on the outside. White honeys, black connects. White, of course, has to go in and take the vital point away from black. Otherwise, black will leave the corner. Black extends at 1-2. White honeys, black blocks, and white connects. Black throws in. This is forcing white to capture. And now, as we can see, there's a Joseki in the corner. Black honeys on top, white extend, black pushes, white extend, black push again, and white extend once again. And here we are at the end of the variation. So in a very simple way, if we want to analyze this situation, is that the corner basically cancel out, right? It's almost like a zero-sum game over here. White has an influence towards the right side. Black has an influence towards the top side. But a very sharp difference that we see is that black has 2 stones versus 1, and it's black's turn, meaning that black seems to have an extra stone somewhere here. So everything seems to be more or less equal. Of course, white is a slightly stronger over here, but could this slight stronger, influence compensate for an extra move? I personally don't think so, and AI agrees with me. So this is not a good position for white. So that is an interesting variation that white cannot actually take. So white cannot do this first line Atari against the wedge. That will be falling into black's trap. The correct move is for white to extend. That is the Joseki move. Black has to block it. If black just worry about getting out, then white Ataris, black connects, and white is going to slide out. But after white slides out, this group is very insecure. White has a very nice influence towards the right. And then black's corner is also not completely alive. So this is a better position for white. The correct move after white extend is to extend on the first line and kill the group over here. White Ataris, and then here there are 2 main variations, right? So, or not 2 main variations, but 2 variations. This is already a very niche variation anyway. Black pushes on top, and white takes. That's a sente because there's a snapback. Black connects. White honeys. Black honeys on top. White cuts. And now we all want to play this, but we don't have enough liberties, and therefore we Atari on the second line, crawl, and then white just keeps extending. As long as black's crawling, white just extends. And now, as we can see, this is a giant, perfect influence towards the right side for white. Lots of territory for black. The result of this is a slightly better position for white because white's potential is way too big, and it's very early in the game. So yeah, this position is better to play as white, and I personally also prefer white in this position. Okay, so that's one possibility. The other one is to just connect. That creates a little bit of weaknesses for white, but white can just connect. And now black needs to hop out, white push and cut. And here we have black Atari, white extend, black capture the 2 stones. The result of this is more or less the same. White has an even bigger influence with a little bit of weakness over here, but it doesn't really cause huge problems as of now. White can extend. White can play a small knight to collaborate with the influence. This is a slightly better position for white as well. Well, this is definitely better than the previous variation that I just showed you. So it seems like when black plays the wedge, white has the possibility to extend on the second line and just form a very nice influence on the outside, and the position will be at least slightly better for white. So what did black play wrong here? Well, when white extends, here black needs to play a very important move. That is to play the Atari first. This is a very nice Tsuji. You might be right. You might be wondering, well, this is just an exchange. Like, why am I playing this when white is obviously going to connect? Well, now let's see the difference. When black extends, white Atari's on top. If we play out everything exactly the same, right? This is the almost the exact same variation where black is going to Atari here and then curl and then curl. Okay, so after this, let's say white exchanges this just for you to see it better, right? We had the exact same position except we have played this cut against white's Atari here. And this is a good exchange for black because later on allows black to extend the stone out on the fifth line. Okay, so if we go back to the variation where black did not make this exchange, let's compare. So you know for sure what I'm talking about, right? So we had this variation. So it's like as if at this point that black played a cut and they exchanged that with white's Atari here. Of course, if you play the cut, white's gonna Atari here. That's the correct response. But it's like white did not respond correctly by Ataring over here. So this is a really good exchange for black because, as I said, even if black doesn't drag it out right away, black could, when black kind of invades over here, there's some lingering threats that thanks to our exchange over here. So this would be more or less an equal position now because of the exchange that black was able to gain a little bit of compensation for this slightly worse variation and bring it back to equal. So a very interesting exchange. If you want to play this variation as black to trick your opponent, then you can definitely play out like this, right? Just get the territory and also leave a little bit aji in white's center. So yeah, that's pretty much the variation, the main variation. After white extend out, we play the Atari. But another thing that white can play when black wedges is white can simply Atari on top. This is also a great variation. So against this move, black will play the shape move, that is to extend out, and white will take and forcing black to connect. This is also a Joseki. The result of this was that white's influence is extremely strong, and there's no nasty exchange that black was able to get over here. But white's influence is it's a little bit less than before, because before our influence was like over on the top side. But now black has a little bit of say of his top side while also capturing the territory here. So white traded a little bit of influence for thickness and for sente. Now it's white sente. White can develop on the right side. So this is also a Joseki total influence versus territory. So you can choose this variation as well if you encounter the wedge. So the wedge isn't such a bad move. Okay, so when white attaches, we all kind of know like, oh, the Joseki move is for you to hana here, but at least today we understand why a lot of people would be reluctant to play the wedge, because that would allow white get a huge influence, and not everybody is comfortable with that. So you see this not very often, but it's actually not such a bad move. So in the next lecture, we'll be talking about, of course, the main variation where black plays the hani on the outside. We'll look at how the liberty fight is going to play out in the corner. So I'll see you in the next lecture. When black plays the outer hane, white will connect on the second line, forcing black to go back and play the tiger's mouth. Well, black doesn't have to play this variation, but what I want to show you is that what happens in the corner. So this liberty fight is very, very common in Mies Joseki, so you kind of have to remember the theory behind this liberty fight, so you don't have to calculate when you actually when you're playing Mies Joseki in your actual game. So the conclusion, well, let's play it out. So White plays the honey, black connects, and of course white has to take this vital point away or else black will have too many liberties. Black extends, and of course we can't let black play this extension because that would create a big eye, which is a lot of liberties. White honeys, black ataris, white connects, and now black plays the honey. That's the correct move for black to play to squeeze white's liberty. White ataris, black connects, and now white connects on the first line. So before we talk about white, let's look at the wrong variation. What if white connects, right? A lot of times we just want to connect into a stick and thinking that we would have most liberties. But in this case, black can throw in and break the eye, and this becomes eye kills no eye, and white is dead. White connects, black squeeze from the outside, and looks like black only has 2 liberties, but then when black squeezes from the outside, this is eye kills no eye. So white cannot connect on the second line, although it looks like the shape move. White needs to make an eye to keep the Seki alive. Black connects, white connects, and now very important for black to exchange the throw-in against white's connect. Black throws in once again, white captures, and black throws in once again, white takes, and now as we can see, this should be black's sente here. Okay, black doesn't have to play and it's already a Seki. And any move that black plays, white kind of have to respond to it. So therefore, this is black's sente. So black in this case would probably play a move over here, strengthening the influence on top. So that is the theory behind the Liberty fight. The result of white right now going in to try to kill black would lead to a Seki where black is going to get the sente. So if white just plays like this right away, black is not too worried about it. What black would be worried about, and this would lead to our main trap for the Mies Joseki. It's actually the most complicated trap, probably, just in Go in general. That is for us to Atari here. Black connects, and now white plays a tiger's mouth. So instead of worrying about the Seki here, white is saying, well, I'm sacrificing all these guys to try to gain compensation on the outside and threaten the group that black has over here. Naturally, black would play the shape move. So now black is alive, and of course white is not alive. The problem with this move is leads to very complex variation. Now white can pincer black from the outside. And now black plays the Kosumi, white pushes up, black extend, white push, black connects, and then we have white playing the small knight over here. And then we can see that black is about to be enclosed, and it's not so easy for black to get out from here. So at this point, it becomes a very fierce fight. Black is desperately trying to get out, but white is desperately trying to seal black in. So if white can seal black in, black has to painfully go back and capture these stones that have very long liberties, and that would be game over because white controls the entire outside, and black has to fill in his own territory. Of course, that's unacceptable. So black has to do whatever it takes to break out, and this is going to be a very bloody fight. Black pushes out, white will hane, black attaches, that's to Tsuji, white blocks, and now black cuts. White now blocks everything, right? While white was able to block everything, but look at the outside. This looks absolutely horrible. So now it's a bloody fight. Black Ataris, white extend, black pushes through here. This stone is very important. Even if it dies later on, right now it creates a lot of insecurity for both groups. So white has to spend a lot of energy to deal with it. White plays the hane, and then black plays the empty triangle. White squeezes, and now black connects. Here, white plays another move to make sure, because you don't play a move, black's going to play here and then squeeze white's liberty. So these guys have to get out first. That's why white plays the extension move. This is very important for liberty. Black now cuts on the outside, completely cutting white into several pieces and trying to break out. White Ataris, black extends, and now white connects. Here, black plays a turn here and white. So this is This is obviously a sente. If you try to fix the weakness here, then the ladder works for black, and that's game over. So in order to fix the ladder, look at how intense this is. White has to not only fix the ladder, but squeeze black's liberty to the maximum, and um, and basically leaving a double Atari. So this is actually a Tsuji, right? Even if white leaves a double Atari, he's still trying to choke black to death. This is such a fierce Joseki. So at this point, we're still not out. This is still Mi's flying knife. Black Ataris. So the idea for white to play here is to bait black into Atari. If black Ataris, white turns and black captures in the center, and now white has an Atari here, right? So losing this stone is not a big deal, right? If we look at the board, what's important is that this group is very important. It needs to live. This liberty fight already is good for white over here. And right now, what white needs to make sure is that this group doesn't die. These 3 stones don't die, and there's no problem that for white over here. So let's see. Black, of course, will extend, and then white extend out. This Atari, white will just connect. And now I'm not certain how black is going to capture any of the white groups. This looks a little bit difficult. So white Ataris and extend, then I think white is just looking very, very crazy. But I think at like this, oh, this is obvious. Then you just get ladder. So black probably has to push once and then play like this. And in that case, I think white can Kosumi out, right? Look at how dangerous it is for both players. They're still going to fight out for a while, but it looks like if white is able to get this group out, and this group out, then black is in serious trouble. So very, very dangerous for black to play like this. So playing the Hani is baiting the double Atari, which means that black will extend here first, not taking a bait. White goes back and capture, and then black captures like this. Or I think the better move is for black to capture in a more efficient way. Here, white cannot connect, obviously, because we cut, and these guys still can't get out. So that's a better move. And then white goes ahead and secure the 3 stones over here. So the result of this is black was able to get out over here. So these guys are safe. This group is alive, means that these guys are just dead. But white was also able to gain compensation by capturing the 3 stones here and the 3 stones here. So that is a more or less a slightly, well, it's more or less equal, but slightly better position for white, because in this particular case, like capturing these 3 stones has a lot of value towards the top, and the game is still in a fairly early to mid stage. So in this case, it would be slightly better position for white. But there's so many tricks and traps along the way, and for a non-professional player to figure this out for the first time is just not possible. So a lot of the secret weapons you can prepare over here, but I just want to show you the depth of Mi's flying knife is absolutely insane, right? So we get to this point, and it's just absolutely wild. So another thing I want to point out, so there are many variations for this fights as well. You can look into it with an AI software or something. This is just beyond the scope of this course. The reason is not because I don't want to talk about complex variations, but rather this is still a domain for research for professionals. So if the professionals don't know it, I wouldn't know it either. So that variation I just showed is like a result of my research. It's one way for both players to settle. Another conclusion I want to say is that if black has a stone over here during this fight, then this is playable for black. But if white has a stone, let's say this stone is white, just imagine that, then this fight is not going to work at all for black. So black cannot choose this variation, which means that at this point, this early in the game, black should not play the Hane here. So if black doesn't like that variation, what should black actually play? We will figure that out in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we talked about black's variation of playing Hane, and we said this is very concerning for black because white has a very aggressive variation where he first claims the entire outside and then sacrifices the stones in the corner and try to seal white inside. When black lives, white will pincer from the outside, and it's not so easy for black to get himself out. So usually black does not really want to go into that variation. It's very dangerous for black. And therefore, the main variation is for black to play the double Hane on top. Against this move, white will play the Atari, black connects, and here starts the main variation. So at this point, if white extends out, which is a variation that is known by most amateur level players, if you play against a high dan amateur level player, he's likely going to play like this as white. Black plays the tiger's mouth, and now white goes ahead and kill the corner, because right now white cannot really play the previous variation because black has already got this cut. So if white extends out, black's going to leave the corner, which means white's dead over here. But when white tries to enclose black, this is not possible because white is really weak on the outside. So for example, like this, black can easily get out. So this variation would not work for white, and if you try it as white, you might just lose the game immediately. It's very important to go back and play out the Seki. So let's review the Seki. Black extends, white Hanes, black blocks, white connects. And now it's black's turn to Hane connect. White connects, black throws in, white connects, black throws in again, and white take. And now we can see this is already a Seki. Therefore, black can Tanuki locally. And he plays the push on top, white extends, and black comes back and capture white stone. So I'd say many players know this variation actually, because I mean, pretty much everybody's heard Mies Joseki, and whenever they hear Mies Joseki, probably the first variation that comes into their mind is this one, because it's just a very easy to understand variation where white is able to develop on the right side and black develops on the top. The result of this is actually slightly better for black. Reason is black is really thick. The influence is very thick over here. There's not like any weakness. However, if you look at white, there's slight weaknesses on the outside, right? If white plays on the outside, later on black has annoying moves like this, looking at the cut and get out, right? Like at this point, you can't really use this way to to prevent this breakout. So this would be a very annoying move later on for white, but there's not really an obvious annoying move, right? Maybe this one, but even if black connects, it doesn't really do much for white. And also in a corner, black will have more points than white over here. So, but while the outside remains a 2 versus 1, but it's white's turn, so it's like black played first and white plays next. So it's like all canceled out. So yeah, the result of this is just slightly better for black, but it's still a very playable game. But of course, white can do better than letting black get into a equal position, and also slightly better, right? Not only it's equal, but slightly better for black. So usually white is not satisfied with the simple extend, right? It's very peaceful, very calm, but it's also not what we want as someone who's good at Mies Joseki, hopefully after this this series. The main variation, well, here's the good news. The main variation is for white to clamp on the second line, and the good news is that it's also very tricky, right? There are many ways for both players to fall into a trap, and I want to talk about this in great details. So against white's clamp here, black of course has to extend down. If you let white capture the stone, then this group gets out with a lot of points and black has to live inside. Black extends down, white now comes back and kill black. And I can pretty much say that with this exchange, white managed to already kill black inside. So let's see white. Usually the main variations for black to play the Atari, but let's look at what happens when black plays the old variation. White Hanes, black blocks, white connects, okay? And then black turns, white just connects. Of course, black will throw in, white takes. When you push once again, I will connect, and then you have to play the tiger's mouth. The reason you can't really push anymore is because white has a cut on the outside. So this is not really about the fight inside. It's about black collapsing on the outside, right? Both black groups has only 2 liberties, and therefore this is game over for black. So black has to go back and fix the cutting point, And now when white throws in, we can see black only has 2 liberties left, and therefore this is white kills black. So black cannot play like this. So at this point, with this move, it's pretty much a death sentence to black's corner. But black can obviously get the compensation through these Atari on the outside. White connects, and now black takes the Punuki. And now we can see that there's a lot of influence towards the outside. And this is absolutely like a giant influence. So the result of this is white was able to capture a giant corner and black gains a giant influence. But very, very, very importantly, and this was something you have to remember, is that the Joseki says white has to add an extra move here and giving black the sente. That's the textbook move for Mies Joseki. Now, you might have a big question. Why does white have to play the Hane here? Let's look at what happens inside the corner. If white decides to Tanuki, let's say black plays the extension over here. White will Hane, black blocks, white connects, and now we'll play the same old Liberty fight where black throws in like this. Actually, black will turn here first. Let's just play the standard Joseki. Okay, so white connects, black throws in, white takes, black push once again, and now white connects. And then when black plays this move over here, white can now throw in like this. Okay, it looks like this is black kills white, right? Because I kills no I. But now all of a sudden, black realizes that he cannot push in either direction. If you push here, obviously there's an Atari and black is all dead. But if you push over here, white is going to cut. And then let's just take a moment. And then we see that black cannot go to the 1-1, right? That's a self-Atari. Black cannot go through here. It's also a self-Atari. If black plays like this, white will connect, and then these guys are captured. But if black plays like this, white connects with an Atari, and then white comes back and capture black, and this is game over. So looks like black cannot really win this fight. Did we misread something? Why does the textbook say that we have to play the Hane? How about we try a different direction? Let's say black plays over here. Then white is going to throw like this. Black blocks. And then white plays on the outside. And it doesn't matter. So if black takes, white will connect. You can play this throw in. I will just take. And then Atari, connect. You play like this. I play like this. You keep pushing. Then white takes back. Right? So at this point, we can see white has 2 liberties, but it's actually 3 because we have the cut over here, remember? So this forces black having to play an extra move on the outside, which means this is a 2-step ko for black, right? So black has to do 1, 2 to start a ko. That is an even 50-50 ko. So this is a very tiring ko for black, and black does not really want to fight this ko. But remember, there's a 2-step ko in here. So it looks like at this point, white can pretty much just Tanuki, right? Because if you Hane here, if black extends here or extend here, neither direction will work. And of course, all the other moves are just even worse. So why does the textbook say that you have to play an extra move over here to close the Joseki or to finish the Joseki? We'll take a look at this in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we have seen that white needs to play an extra move to finish the Joseki. But we have also shown that even if white doesn't play locally, the best black can do is to get a 2-step ko. So why does white have to play a move over here? Or why is white in a rush to add an extra move over here? First of all, if white Tanukis, black's tiger's mouth is going to be a sente against the corner. If white Tanukis once again, then black can start fighting in the corner. White Hanes, black blocks, white connects. We have seen this Liberty fight many times. And of course, the intuition is that since that black has an extra tiger's mouth to fix the cutting point, we can see now this is an I kills no I, and this tactic no longer works because of the tiger's mouth here. So that's just a minor reason why white wants to add an extra move. to cancel out the move for this tiger's mouth. But the most important reason is that if white decides to tanuki, black has a very severe follow-up locally. And this is the trap that you can set up as black, right? We've talked about a lot about what kind of traps that white can set up, against white can set up against black, especially with the reading insight. If you have mastered the reading insight, then you don't have to spend a lot of time reading if you're playing a tournament. But here is a very big trap that white would fall in if he tanukis, is that black can set up a trap by playing the shoulder hit here. This is a very severe local follow-up, and this is the main reason why white adds an extra move in the corner. So against this move, white seems to have many options, but actually all of them are just pretty much none of them can properly counter this move. This is not even a trick. This is the correct move for black to play, and it's very hard to deal with white as white. So if white plays the crawl, black will block. It's very aggressive. If white cuts on top, black will push back, and this is looking at the weaknesses that these guys have. White will obviously Atari, black extends, and now white blocks. But as it turns out, since white's extension is a sente, so if you don't answer this, black will play another extension, and now black has a big eye, and this, you can remember that this shape will always kill a shape like this, because black has a lot of liberties inside. So since black's extension on the first line is a sente, white has to play an extra move to make sure that this corner cannot get a big eye. But then when black turns, we realize that black has a beautiful tsuji over here. That is the throw-in over here. When white struggles, then we can Atsari and connect, and then white is dead. And of course, if white just captures, we all know what to do. We can Atsari on top, and pretty much white has to already give up these stones and come back and capture, because this would be game over. But it's game over anyway if you reach this position for black, because black gets out and white gets killed. So the push and cut will not work. Let's look at some other refutations. The other one is for white to peacefully Hane on the second line. Here, black has to just extend, because tactically you can't really play the Hane because white can capture it. White crawls, black extends, and white turns on top to fix the shape, and now black extends on top. As we can see, these exchanges are extremely favorable for black because white is all pressed onto the second line, and black has a giant influence towards the outside. So this influence will pay off in the long run, but remember, black's tiger's mouth is still a sente. So that was the extra minor reason for white to add an extra move over here. So that still exists. All the variations I talked about are still valid. Okay, so but also, not to say that from the last lecture we said that there's also a possibility for a two-step code. Basically, if white plays elsewhere, black will extend, and then when you play like here, inevitably this is going to be a ko over here. So black can also play like this to cause trouble in the corner. So even if it's a very tiring ko for black, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it's still a threat that's looming for white. So there's a lot of values, they add up together, and then that makes it worth a white's extra move over here. So we just look at white's crawling on the third line, and then we see that it doesn't work very well. Well, what about white just jumps out like this? Against this move, black can push and then Hane. This is the shape move, preventing white from Atari. Now, as we can see, there's a lot of liberty issues for white over here. Now, if white plays on the outside, like playing a tiger's mouth, it looks like the shape. This would be falling into a big trap because black will throw in, white takes, black Ataris, white connects, and now black Ataris, forcing white to connect. And all of a sudden, thanks to the first line Atari, black can start the liberty fight. And this changes everything. White throws in, black takes. The reason white throws in is obviously to prevent the big eye. And now if we fight out, if we play out the liberty fight, we can see that even if white has to cut, that's not a problem. White can black can just give white an extra liberty by spending a move here. And then when white takes, black comes back, and this is I kills no I. So this is also not going to work for white. And of course, white would not choose this variation. Probably at this point, just play the block over here, forcing black to come back. But still, this is disastrous because black has a very strong outside and the corner becomes a seki. And all what white got was just this little thing over here. So of course, this would be a terrible position for white at this point. What about white pushing over here, right? So against this move, if black blocks, then white will just connect and white is totally fine. And this is a terrible position for black. But of course, black would push first, forcing white to connect, and then black turns on top. It's still a very annoying Atari on the first line. So when white Atari's black connects, white pretty much has to connect on the second line to prevent that Atari. And the reason you have to play like that and not this is because you don't want this to be a sente, as we have seen. If black gets into this position, white's in trouble. So because of this annoying first line sente for black, white is forced to play a very dumb looking move, and then black can poke and then start an attack. So the result of this is not only black's tiger's mouth remain a sente, but also now look at this group. This group is a very heavy group, and it's just a terrible position for white. Even if white manages to kill black's corner, black gained way too much compensation on the outside. So that is pretty much the variation for white's jump. It doesn't work very well because of the liberty issues, especially with these Atari or the extend on the first line. White is not very comfortable. Now, what about white plays the push on top first? Now, against this move, black has a Tsuji. That is the jump on the second line. Now, against this move, this is very annoying actually because you always have to watch out that black extend on the first line is a sente. So if white pushes, black will block. When you Atari, black will just connect. Now white cannot really capture the stone. It looks very comfortable locally, but then as we said, if this extension is a sente, then white's in trouble because black is threatening to connect. So pretty much at this point, white will go back and fix and try to kill black. So eventually you still play the move over here. And now black will not, so don't rush to connect because that allows white to get out. The correct move is for black to extend on the fifth line. And now there's no way for white to break out. So the correct move for white right now is probably just Tanuki because locally black is already losing the liberty fight. But black's connect will become a sente against this group, forcing white to play an extra group over here, extra move over here. If white Tanukis, black has a squeeze over here, and this is very tough for white to deal with. Basically, this is so white pretty much, if white plays here, then I think black's Tsuji is to play the extension on the first line. Actually, the details matters a lot. So black will play here. That's the correct move. When white connects, black will Hane on top. Okay, and then if white tries to kill, then black will play like this. And then it looks like it's black's going to kill white. If you connect, I can Atari. So white cannot fill in here. Therefore, white starts with the outside. But then black will connect. And when you squeeze, I can Atari and then block. This is a seki, but it's a fake seki because white's dead over here. So that's not... So that's game over. It means the quarter of the board is dead for white. So it doesn't matter how many moves you gain on the outside. Okay, so the reason white needs to connect over here is because if you don't, black's going to throw in and it's going to squeeze your liberty. Let's say if you play something like that, then I have the throw in. Okay, then Atari over here because I have two liberties, right? I'm threatening to connect over. Of course, you won't allow that, but whether you allow or not, this is game over, right? I'm able to capture you on top. So yeah, I guess I need to spend a little bit of time talking about why this is a sente. So when white connects, black plays the Tsuji. White's most resilient way to fight is probably to just jump out like this, but then black can push like this, and then start a co-fight. But then, as you can see, there's a lot of co-threats in here, so black can make use of them by throwing in. White takes, and then black takes back. And if white loses this co, that means that this group is going to be dead, and likely this is going to be game over. And it does look like white doesn't have enough co-threats, right? Um, so yeah, like how do you find co-threats? This is not a co-threat, which means black will just connect. So when black connects over here, white has to add an extra move to claim the profits. And at this point, you can tell this is a sente for black. So white only has an extra move on the outside because black has 2, white has 4, but white, it's black's turn. But as you can tell, this trade between this amount of points versus this thing, plus the influence, plus these 2 dead stones, of course, this is a better game for black moving forward. So locally, if white tries to fight this, black needs to play outside. Okay, black tanukis. If white tries to fight this way, of course we block and there's nothing. The best is for white to play like this, black Ataris, and then blocks outside, and then black is gonna play here next, so this will kill white. So this would not work for white. Okay, trying to fight over here. So we spend a lot of time talking about the details, talking through why this is a sente. This connection as a sente is actually very important, and likely you will encounter your opponent playing this. This would be the instinct of many players, right? Why do we not like push on top first, right? This is very intuitive, but actually this is not a great variation. So at this point, as white, probably the best way to get out of this is just to take a loss like this. This is not a great variation for white either, but at least tactically, white is okay over here. Okay, the corner is still killed, but black gained tremendous influence. And as I said, later on this, white has to respond with this move anyway. So this move has a lot of value. It doesn't look like it has a lot of value, but it's actually huge value. Because if white's extend is a sente, that really helps living on top, right? Not only that's a sente, this is also a sente, and this is also a sente. So white can even choose which sente to use. So black's tiger's mouth definitely has a lot of values, and then he gained compensations over here. So I hope this part is clear, like why this move looks so strong, right? So it's not at first glance you'll be like, this move doesn't look very strong because it doesn't really kill white or anything like that. But the more you study it, or the more you think about these variations, you'll realize that this move is actually very severe against white because it gains a lot of influence for free. Okay, so let's quickly recap. Okay, we have talked about the tiger's mouth, the Hane variation, right? So when white Atari black connects, instead of extending, which is not something I recommend because it's a very simple passive way to reach equality for white, and white is slightly worse. So I don't recommend that. I recommend this tricky variation for white to clamp on the second line. If your opponent sees it for the first time, it's very likely he's going to make a mistake. Black extends. White goes in and kill the corner. Black gets the double Atari and the Panuki. And instead of Tanuki, it's very important to play the Hane on the first line, securing the kill over here, meaning that this tiger's mouth is a gote for black. So you can pretty much do whatever kind of dance you want later on. Let's say you want to live, you can just play like this. You don't have to answer in the corner. You can just keep basically Atari and then play a 2-space extension if you want. And your corner is going to be fine thanks to your move here. So that would be the end of the Joseki. At this point, as we can see, white was able to kill black in here. Black has 4 liberties remaining. The corner is clean dead, but black later on can make use of white's shape problem and play an attach over here, right? Looking at some liberty issues that white has over here. So white has some shape problems, but white has a lot of territory over here. So this is more or less equal position moving forward. And I think as white you can play out like this. It's very tricky for black to play all the correct moves, to understand all the theory behind it. You can even test black out. You can be like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to Tanuki. And let's hope black will make a mistake of playing a move like this, starting the two-step ko, or black plays like this. It will simply be killed in here, right? Like, so if this corner dies, then all of your groups are very thick. So that would be black falling into your trap. So you can definitely try this out in your game. You don't have to play the textbook move. You can just play on the outside just for fun to see if your opponent actually knows this Tsuji. Very likely he won't if he's an amateur level player. So very interesting to test your opponent out. I think that's the fun of this game, is that you don't have to play everything like the textbook. So that would end our basically our section on the tiger's mouth. Okay, we talked about many variations with this tiger's mouth over here. Turns out to be one of the main variations that many professionals still plays nowadays. So apart from playing the tiger's mouth here for white, which is a very tricky variation that we spend many videos talking about, in the next video we'll start a new topic that is for white to Atari and play the flying knife. Well, it's the knife of the flying knife. This is a very sharp move. Many variations as well. So it's not possible for me to cover every single variation for this particular branch, but because this branch contains the most variations and it's the trickiest. I would say, well, the tiger's mouth was also very tricky, but this variation is definitely tricky as well. So we'll spend a few videos going through some of the main ideas and then show you how to safely navigate as white and as black, and basically illustrate you some of the main ideas so you can safely use this knife in your tournament. So we'll go through that in the next lecture. Okay, starting this lecture, we'll be talking about the actual knife in the flying knife, and this is it's a very cool variation. Black plays a tiger's mouth, white Hanes, black connects. Now white Atari's on top, black has to connect, and white plays the flying knife. So at first glance, this is very confusing for any players because there's so many cutting points. You might be even wondering, like, how can this even be a variation for white, because white is just collapsing on the outside. So let's analyze each cutting point at a time, and we can start to feel how amazing this game is. If black cuts over here, white connects, black extends, and white fixes the cutting point on the bottom. And all of a sudden, we used to think that white has a collapsing shape. All of a sudden, black doesn't know what to do here, right? White is actually not collapsing on the outside. This Atari doesn't really do much because white doesn't really care about the stone over here. If you're Atari, I just extend and then capture your two stones here. You didn't really handle the corner, so you can't even play this move as of yet, because white can simply play a move to capture the corner, and black doesn't really have enough compensation on the outside. Okay, so that wouldn't work. Now, black has to protect the corner. White Hanes, black connects, and now white plays the extension move. The reason you don't want to play the attach is because this time black actually has this variation. Okay, so then you make the sacrifice, the game will be more or less equal. But actually, white doesn't have to reach for equality. White can fight for better because black has made a mistake by cutting over here. This is not a valid variation. So black will play the extension, forcing black to block on the second line. And now white connects on top, completely fixing the weaknesses on the outside. Now, as we can tell, white pretty much controls the outside. And the problem is there's a liberty fight over here. So even if black manages to kill white inside, black has to go back many times to just capture a corner that's already drastically reduced because of the squeeze. So that wouldn't be acceptable. The only hope is for black to get out. If black can get out on the side, this would be a better position for black. But unfortunately, tactically, white has a Tsuji that is to just extend out. If black captures, white will Atari and then extend on the first line, and the liberty inside here, it's going to be white kills black. If black connects over here, then we all know what to do. We can just ladder the stone on the third line. And now, as we have said, black can go ahead and kill white. It's going to be so tiring for black. It's a lot because white has a lot of liberties, and it's just very annoying. But white already gained a lot of profits on the outside. These guys are pretty much they're not useless, but their mobility is drastically reduced because white is very thick over here thanks to the ladder. So white controls the entire outside, and black has a very small corner because of the liberty squeeze. This is a very big lead for white moving forward. So that shows you that cutting over here doesn't really work. Well, what about the other cut? What if white cuts over here? Against this move, white will follow the same idea, Atari, and then connect on top. It's very important for white to connect this weakness instead of cutting point here, because white doesn't really care too much about the two stones, but connecting over here puts a lot of pressure on black over here. So it's about the thickness for both players. Therefore, white needs to connect on top. Now, if black captures white, white will simply play out the Kosumi, and then black is kind of dead because white can go into the corner and make an eye, and we can it's kind of obvious that black is dead because that black doesn't even have an eye yet. So that would obviously not work. But what about black plays the Hane in the corner? White Hanes, black connects, and now white follows the same idea, not letting black wedge on the second line. Black blocks, white plays the Kosumi, black extends, and now white just goes ahead and start the liberty fight. Black goes in, white squeezes, black keeps crawling, and then white blocks over here. Black extends, white goes for liberty, and at this point we can see that black is short by 1 liberty, right? Black is captured over here. So this would also be a very terrible variation for black, because even at this point, even if black doesn't play anything, which is a better choice for black, right? You shouldn't exchange all the moves inside because you're wasting a bunch of co-threats and possibilities. This is white kills black. So white has a lot of territory, a lot of influence towards the top, a little bit of influence towards the right thanks to these 3 guys. But more importantly, black has to spend an extra move over here. Problem is, white later on has very annoying testing move for black. At least this peep is a Sente. Black has to capture. So black looks very over-concentrated while white has a very big corner and very strong influence. So this would also be a very big leading game for white. So none of the cutting points, the 2 cutting points over here are just traps that white is setting up for black. So there are 2 remaining cutting points. One is the cut on top, which is a main variation. The other one is also a legit variation that is for black to cut on the third line. Against this move, white can connect over here. If black cuts on top, white extends, and that is the main variation that we're going to talk about in the next lecture, because this is pretty much as if black cuts here first, white connects, and then black's correct move is the cut over here, and white extends. So this is the main variation. So you can pretty much transition to the main variation if when black cuts, you connect over here. Okay, so the problem with black cutting here is gives white another option, that is for white to connect over here instead. That is a different variation, like drastically different. Against this move, black's correct move is to cut over here. So at this point, white's correct move is to simply ladder the stone right now. This is a very cunning move, right? It looks like, well, black is cutting here, but white is not really responding, and this is very tricky. If most of the time your opponent might just play another move to double tap this, right? It'd be like, well, this Atari looks really nice because if white connects, white has a very terrible shape. But the problem is this move doesn't really help the ladder. Okay, so now white can just go back and capture the corner, and this would be game over for black because this corner is dead. Without any sort of only 3 liberties, and it isn't much, and black isn't really getting anything substantial. This move is still having a lot of value. Later on, you can play a 2-space extension, and this stone is not even captured from the board yet. So this is a terrible variation for black. So black cannot fall for that trap. Black has to go into the corner. White Hanes, black connects. So at this point, white needs to get himself out. This corner cannot just die unconditionally. There are 2 ways for white to do it. One is to attach, the other one is play the extension. Let's first look at the extension. When white extends, black has to block, because if you just Atari on top, this is a move that black really wants to play but doesn't have time. Because when white connects, black takes, white takes. Now, as we can see, yes, this group is quite strong, but doesn't have any points. White is all connected over here with points. White has a very beautiful group. It's going to generate points towards the right. The worst problem for black is that the corner is still not alive. So black has to play an extra move to live the corner, and this is white's sente. So this position would not even be playable for black because it's just way too good for white. White got everything on the outside, and black doesn't really get much. Okay, which means when white extends, black has to block. White plays the Kosumi, and for the exact same reason, black has to disconnect the two white groups. White blocks to fix the weakness on top. Black Ataris, white connects, and now as we can see, black now can run. The ladder has been broken. But then white just plays a very ugly shape to get himself out like this. Black extends, white keeps pushing, black extends again, white pushes again. Black cannot really allow this Hane, and therefore he has to push once again. This generates a lot of profits. And now as we can see, black gains so much territory on the bottom, but what white got in compensation is Atari and push. Now as we can see, these three stones are under control, and this group is pretty much dead because this group can't really win the Liberty fight against the corner, as we have shown before. So even if black's two groups are kind of under control, especially this group is pretty much dead, there's still a lot of sente moves that black can play on the outside. For example, this later on will be a sente move. Black has the Aji over here, the squeeze. If you connect over here, black still has two cutting points here. So there's always a little bit of insecurity for white, even if white manages to capture black. It's not like white has completely taken the stones off the board yet. So because, or thanks to black's 5 liberties over here, white always have to watch this group's liberty as well. So there's always concerns for white on the outside, and therefore this game is more or less an equal position. We would be a Joseki variation. So we looked at the white's extension. So if you love to gain the territory first, then you can choose this variation. Okay, so let's just show it one more time. You can choose this variation because white was able to kill this group. White also gained a lot of outside influence. The only problem is that white has some weaknesses pretty much everywhere, and therefore it doesn't feel secure. But what black got in compensation is the insecurity white has over here, and a lot of territory black has here as compensation for everything that black lost over here. So it really depends on your style, whichever way you, it depends on your style. If you like this position as white, you should definitely play it out. So we talked about the extension over here. Let's quickly wrap up the attach on the second line. Against this move, black will play the wedge here. White now extends because white can't really fight this. Black has just have too many co-threats, and therefore it's not going to work for white. So the only move is for white to extend. And of course, black has to disconnect and claim the corner territory. So this time is black kills white, but now white can obviously secure the outside by extending this move, right? Since black didn't play the Atari, will prevent black from Ataring here. Black will push out through here. White extends, black push, and white blocks. Atari, and all these are forced. And now we can see black can come back and capture the stone here. So white cannot really connect because that would just lead to an Atari. So at this point, white is pretty much all dead in the corner. Okay, but white will get this in compensation when black connects. So if black takes, of course, we have an Atari. So black doesn't want that, therefore he connects. But white is going to connect right now. And this is the absolute sente. If your opponent is not careful, then we have this very nasty Atari, and then Atari, and then we're able to capture the 3 stones back, which means black still has to play extra moves to claim our corner. So of course black will need to make another move to take, and then white can add an extra move to make sure that all the Aji here kind of vanish. So now we can see this is a total influence versus territory game. The game is still equal. So if you love territory, then the black, playing black in this variation is definitely the variation for you. But if you're like me, who likes influence and balance, I I personally prefer white slightly, right? I think I still face a lot of pressure in this position because black claims so much territory and I really have to play well on the outside to gain that amount of territory back at some point. Okay, so today we have covered 3 of the 4 cutting points. We said why this cut doesn't work and why this cut doesn't work. And then we said why this cut is one of the main variations. White can connect here. That's what we said. And it will lead to the 2 variations that I talked about where they kind of lead to very different situations. If you remember, you cut over here, play here after this exchange. So if white plays this, means that white wants to kill black, and therefore we'll get into this position. So let's review it real quick. This is a kind of recap, right? Leads to this position where white kills black, but black has a say of the outside with the stone and a lot of territory. So this position is very dynamic, it's very chaotic, and it's equal. Or white can choose a simpler influence versus territory, right? We can attach over here, and then we said after a lot of Ataris, at this point, black has to spend another move, and white is going to play the Atari on top. And this is just very extreme, where it's almost like Takemiya versus Chochikon, right? So it's very very extreme style of playing. They're both good variations for both sides, so you can play as black or as white for fun. So we talked about connecting over here as one of the main variations. We also said when white connects over here, black will cut and white will extend. And this is the exact same variation as if black cuts here first, forcing white to connect over here, and then black cuts over here. So what happens with black cuts over here? So when white plays the flying knife, black cuts. Now at this point, this move is so great it creates a lot of weaknesses for white. There's a double Atari here that is something white has to worry about immediately, and therefore white is going to connect, and that's the correct move. So black cannot be too happy. Yes, locally you can break out over here, but then when white plays the Hane, this corner is dead, and that's game over. So black has to live the corner first, and the best way is for him to actually break white into pieces over here. Against this move, white will extend, making sure that black cannot get out through here anymore, and therefore, instead of trying to capture the corner, which is impossible now because of this move, white is going to try to capture the black group over here. Black plays the Kosumi, which is the shape move that presses against white. This is of course a sente against white's group over here. White has to go find some extra liberties in the corner, so the Hane is the correct move. At this point, this is a very complex situation for black, and your opponent doesn't really know the theory. It's very easy for this to be over in a few moves. So for example, if black tries to kill the corner, that's one way of losing the game. It looks like locally black has a cut, which is a very nice move to squeeze white's liberty, but at this point white can simply extend, and now black is in serious trouble, because if black plays the peep, white will connect. When black extends out, this is already too late because white can just come back and capture black like this, because black only has 2 liberties, and that's really the moment to resign. If black plays the Hane, white will actually Atari out. And since black cannot capture any of the white's groups, and this would also be a game over because black only has 3 liberties. This is literally game over because all of these died, which means all of these stones are useless, and this group is still not alive, so a quarter of the board is just dead for black. So when white extends, this is game over. So that's how serious the situation is. Black cannot really attack the corner just yet. Now, another big mistake for black to make is to Atari here. That's also a losing move because now white has the time to come back and kill black. And now, as we can see, if black tries to kill the corner, this doesn't really work because white already has 2 eyes, and then black can't really get out. Even the Tsuji doesn't work because white can just follow up like this. Okay, so when you play the Hane, I can still block. Because you have to connect on the first line, I can come back and capture, and this is also white's alive and then black is dead. What about the outside? If you play a move like this, white can just get out like this. The wedge doesn't really work because white can just play like this, and then we can tell this wedge is not working because of this shape, right? You take, I just have the time to take back, and now I have an Atari here. So if you continue with this path, then I can Atari on the outside, and then we can tell that this is game over for black. So on the outside, white with a simple jump is just out. Nothing really, there's not really a Tsuji that you can play to capture white. If you play here, I can play the tiger's mouth over here. So if you can't capture the outside, you can't capture the corner, means that this group is dead, and that's just game over. Okay, so two very fatal mistakes locally. The correct move is for black to play the peep here. So this is a better move because when white tries to play this move, which now is a fatal mistake for white because black extends out, white doesn't really have a way to survive. All right, nothing's going to work here. You play here, I'm going to Hane, and white just can't get out. This won't get white out because I can Atari from behind. And of course, if you play here, I can just Hane, and then white is also dead. So white doesn't really have the time to take the vital point here. White has to protect these guys over here. Black Ataris, white connects, black now cuts. White has to answer. Black extends and white blocks on the first line. This is what you see in the, this is the variation that you have seen in the intro video on YouTube that I have shown. So black Hanes, and now white plays, it's very important. So white plays the throw in. So instead of capturing, white will play a throw in here. This is a Tsuji that was discovered by Mi Yuting 9P, and therefore this entire flying knife series was named after Mi Yuting, and we call it Mi's Joseki. I tend to call this Mi's Joseki. Mi's Joseki is exactly flying knife Joseki, but in Chinese everybody calls it kind of like the Mi's flying knife. So the reason this move is so good is because later on it's going to squeeze black's liberty by 1 and achieve a completely different result. Now let's first look at what if we don't throw in, right? What if we just take? Black throws in, white takes, black crawls, and now white plays the Kosumi. Black connects, and white connects over here. And black connects. White push, black extends, white push again. Black comes back to capture the stone on the second line, and now white extends. So everything looks almost the same as in the intro video, right, that you have seen. But what's the problem right now is that white has 3 liberties, as we can see. But how many liberties does black have? Black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because this you cannot immediately fill in. So white has to spend a move over here to capture black. So this is a 5 versus 3 in the corner. This means that none of these moves are sente for white, right? Blocking here, playing the bamboo here, or extend here. They're all gotes, which means that this group is actually quite weak. And in fact, the next move, black will run out, and then this weakness is going to cause a problem for white, a very significant problem for white. Imagine all of these are sente for you, then this group is very strong. But now, because of an extra liberty over here, this is very weak for white, and this is a very bad position for white. But me discovered this throw in. Is at this point, white actually has a throw in here. This forces black to capture. So now white plays the Kosumi, black Ataris, white captures, and black throws in. White takes, black now cannot connect here. This would be a blunder. Black has to connect on the second line. Let's see why black can't really play here. White will obviously prevent the Atari, and when black plays the Kosumi, it looks like white only has 2 liberties, but now white has a Tsuji here. That is to play Hane on the first line. And can you believe that now white all of a sudden has 4 liberties? So white jumped from 2 to 4. The reason is black has to spend 1 move, 2 moves to be able to fill in here. Okay, it doesn't matter which direction you play, you will have to spend 2 moves on the outside. but then black is dead here. So let's say if black tries to make himself 4 liberties, white will simply squeeze. When black plays here, white squeezes again. Black really wants to fill in here, but he can't. He has to take the stones first, and then white Ataris from behind, and we can call this a game over for black. And of course, if you just play like this, white can Atari like this. When you capture, I can Atari, and this is also game over for black. So at this point, it's sometimes your opponent might play a blunder by connecting over here. That would be the wrong move. The correct move is for black to connect on the second line and form an I. So against this, white is going to sacrifice the corner by playing the Atari, push, black comes back and capture. And now white extends on the 4th line. This is a very important move for the influence. And now as we can see, when black connects, white blocks. At this point, it's pretty much the end of the Joseki, where black finishes by playing an extra move on the outside. Okay, so it's very important for black to drag out the stone because the ladder is working for black. If the ladder doesn't work for black here, you cannot choose this variation at all. So black has to run out, causing insecurities for both sides. But now, as we can see, the insecurity for this group has been drastically reduced thanks to the ingenious the white's exchange of the throw-in, forcing black to play an extra stone here for free. But playing this stone for free is purely harming black right now, because black went from 5 liberties to 4 liberties, which means that during the fight, okay, so white extends, black turns, and then black probably jumps out, and then we play out like this, for example. This is one possible continuation where white gained the profits over here and build on the site. Black has a group hanging, but black captured the corner. As we can see later on, this is a sente, okay? This is also a sente. This is another sente. This is so much better than not having these sentes, right? As we can see, white is really, really strong here, right? White can probably even go further now thanks to this these sentes. So very important exchange. Without exchange, this variation would not have existed, and therefore they named it after the person who invented the beautiful move over here, that is to throw in. So let's quickly just replay this variation. Okay, so at this point, because of the exchange over here, black has to run out, and then we get to this position. So white, of course, does not have to exchange these moves right away. You can save them as co-threats, and co-threats are very valuable, so don't waste them immediately. So the result of this is that this is a equal position for both sides, where black gained the territory, white gained the influence. Now later on, white can also, let's say some moves play out, probably like, I don't even know what black's going to play here. Probably black will play it in the corner. But later on, white also has this continuation to develop on the right side. So this is a very good position. I think I personally like white slightly better. I think it's a great position for white. Of course, this should be equal because black gained a lot of territory as well. So that is the biggest flying knife from me. And the reason, as you can see, it's called Mi's Joseki was because of the throw-in move to Tsuji that Mi has discovered. Because before this move has been discovered, the professional players did not really like this variation for white, and you can tell why, because this throw-in makes such a huge difference, and now this becomes a main variation. So very impressive work by me, and he definitely studied a lot before coming up with such a beautiful move. Alright guys, unfortunately this would be the last lecture for the Mi's Joseki. Of course, it's impossible to cover all the different variations. As I have said in my YouTube intro video, there are 700 plus variations in Mi's Joseki, right? But I think after this course, if you were able to kind of digest or master most of the videos that I have presented, you should definitely become an expert. Like 100% you'll become an expert, at least in the amateur level field, right? Like if you go to, say, for example, like a European Go Congress, or you go to US Go Congress or whatever tournament, and you're playing someone who's not professional, and you enter the flying knife Joseki, I'm pretty sure you'll gain an advantage because I think these lectures have been very thorough. In terms of sources, I have gathered. I was able to create these lectures because of the thanks to the material provided to me by different professionals online, and I was also paying attention a lot when I was watching a lot of the games. So there's like a Chinese there's still a Chinese Weiqi TV type of channel where they would present a lot of professional games. So whenever they had a Mies Joseki playing, I would always pay attention. So it's through a lot of my, I guess, gathering, a lot of the work, right? Like whenever there's a Mies Joseki, I will pay attention, see if there's a different variation. I would try to note them or try to remember them. And of course, there are also lectures online where I kind of translated some of the ideas. Some of the ideas are outdated, like they're courses from many years ago. Of course, a lot of them are gray material, but some of them are being are eliminated. Right, some of the variations that one of the professional was saying 5 years ago have been eliminated. Right, and that just shows you that Mies Joseki is constantly evolving. It's a subject by itself, right? It's like a branch of subject inside Go game, and it's still evolving, and I mean, at some point, if one of my variations becomes eliminated, well, then that would also be normal. Like it's because it's just that's just how it works. Like things are changing all the time because AI are digging deeper and deeper into variations, and we always discover new things. But this doesn't mean that this lecture is not useful. Indeed, it's still very useful. A lot of main variations have been tested by many professional games. They have been tested by the best AI software in China. So, so a lot of variations that you have seen here will remain good for a very long time or even forever. Um, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly enjoy all the complex variation and explaining all the complex variation for you. If you have any questions, please send me a message about any of the variations. Send me a message on Patreon because you guys are already members. If you are buying this product, you can also like become a free member and then message me as a free member. Then I can also answer any questions you have. So as always, thank you so much for supporting my work. I have spent a few weeks to put these work together, so it hasn't been easy, but I'm very happy that I finished it and that I'm able to present it to you. And I think it's probably the first time anyone presenting such a complex Joseki in English. So I'm glad I did it. Whether it was good quality or not, that's not for me to say. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in another video.